All right, it is time for shattered values. So we are going to be starting out with value scale number 1 on your worksheet. So follow along with the directions, but if you read, you're going to be filling that first square as dark as you possibly can. Now, I highly recommend that you actually build up your values. It's going to be easier to erase if you end up needing to for whatever reason, but build those values up. It ends up looking a higher quality. Yes, it takes a little bit more time, but good art takes time, okay? And then you go to that next box and you make it a little bit lighter. And then you go to the next box and you make it a little bit lighter. And you're going to be continuing that process throughout. But if you notice, I'm trying to go in different directions. I like to go horizontal one time, then vertical the next time. I find that that's the easiest way to find that consistency. And you're not using a lot of pressure. And then you just allow that to build up. So I started by getting that base kind of spread throughout each of the boxes, right? And then I could see that most of them were very, very similar. And so I go back to the ones that have kind of more of a jump between them. So they're too different from each other. You want them to be close, but each box needs to be its own value. So you can see like I'm going through, I'm going to be kind of erasing. I don't have a great eraser, so I'm just kind of dealing with it. But I kind of go back and forth and make sure that every single one of those boxes are different values. Okay. And then I go in and I really need to make sure I make these next ones different. So I'm just getting a little bit more pressure into that one. Same thing with this one, and so on and so forth. Now, some people prefer kind of going the opposite direction. So they like to start at that really light and then build up from there, and they find that that's easier. So it's all kind of personal preference, but you just need to make sure that in the end that all of your boxes have a different value and they're going in order from darkest to lightest, and every box is actually individual. Now, if you notice, I'm not doing any sort of blending. I might use an eraser because I made an area too dark, but otherwise I'm not blending with these squares, okay? That's part of that skill building that you want to make sure that you're practicing. So now we're going to be working on value scale number 2. So this is going to be a blended value scale. So you're going to kind of refer to the value scale that you made above with the boxes, but now it's going to smoothly go between each value. So you can kind of see I started with the left side being that really dark again. And then I like to go to that light side and kind of build it up going backwards. Different ways to go about this, but now this is when you practice more of that blending piece. So it's not going to have the same sections. You shouldn't see box, box, box. There shouldn't be any big jumps between any of the values. It should all blend nice and smoothly. You can see that I kind of go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, but I'm always just using like a medium to light pressure because I can build that up. Now for blending tools, a lot of times I just use my finger because then I don't have to get anything, but you can see how that kind of creates an effect. I'll use that eraser to really brighten up that light spot, right? And kind of same thing, I use a lot of pressure in the really light areas, and then I actually lighten up my pressure with my eraser as they get darker. So I find that helps blend it together a little bit more, all right? Now, some people like to use the Kleenex, some people like to use the blending stub. Really, you can kind of use whatever you'd like as long as those values are matching up properly and you're getting a very nice, smooth value scale blend. Now we're on to the last part of the front page, our draft layouts. So we're not looking for a ton here. Really, this is just kind of giving us a rough idea as to what your project might look like. So I always start, like I have a paint palette, right? Keep it very simple. I don't have a lot of details. You're not shading. And then you shatter it with lines. So this is one way of doing that, right? So it's all coming from one point. You could do something like that. Maybe you could do block letters. If you don't know how to do block letters, I like to write out the letters and then essentially just make an outline for them. So you can always do something like that. And then same thing, shatter that. But really just keep your drawing very simple and try out different ways of shattering. What layout do you like the best? Maybe you want to combine some ideas, but that's really all that these 4 squares are for. So now we're on to the back side of this worksheet. So this is where you kind of really actually practice the skills that you're going to be using in your actual project. Okay, so in every single section, if you read the directions, you're going to be developing a value scale, a blended value scale, like we did on the front, and you're having that super dark to the super light. So test out different ways on how to get that. So you can kind of see, like, I'm shading in different directions. Same thing, I'm not using a ton of pressure, but I'm building that pressure, and then making sure that I'm having the super light next to the super dark. Super light next to super dark creates contrast, which then actually allows your project to pop out. It provides clarity, and it's a higher quality project. So some ideas, food for thought. I like to do, you can kind of see my X's there. So I like to do that. I'm like, this is the side that I need to have dark, so I can make sure that things, like the light areas are next to the dark areas, right? Make sure that you are getting to that super light. You're not shading it into a gray. It does need to get to that white. If it doesn't have that white and you're putting next to dark, it's not going to necessarily pop out. So keep that in mind. Sometimes you will need to change the direction of your shading, and sometimes your plan is going to change. It's not going to be a perfect system, but really just do your best throughout. So kind of see some of the ways that I go about doing this, and hopefully you can find some tidbits. This side is also your opportunity to practice maybe different blending techniques. Maybe you want to try out a Kleenex and see how that blends. Maybe you want to try out your finger, see how that blends. Maybe you want to try out a blending stub, see how that blends. Maybe you want to use color in your project. If you want to use color, this is the time to practice it, because color, you actually can't blend necessarily with a blending stub, so you really need to make sure that you are doing that all with pressure and making sure that you're having that build up. So I also did a little area where I drew a heart, so you can practice doing something like that. Maybe you are planning on doing a heart for your project. Draw a heart in yours and make sure that it pops out properly, because then that way you know your project is probably going to be better. Yes, really take this opportunity to take this as a practice for your project. The more seriously you take this part, the easier project is going to be. So another technique you can kind of see what I did here is very lightly, kind of sloppily shaded in my darker sides to make sure that I have dark next to light for all the areas, kind of like my X technique. So maybe that works out better for you. If you're finding that you get a lot of pencil on your hand, you can put a Kleenex, paper, anything really underneath your hand, and that'll actually help protect your hand and you reduce smudging from section to section. So that might be something you might want to try out. So when you're finished, this is what the backside should look kind of like, unless you're testing out colors. So good luck.